The scream tore through the morning air before the sun even touched the gold gate. Servants scattered like frightened chickens as Madame Ifonse dragged the young girl across the stone courtyard by her hair. The girl's knees scraped against the ground, leaving thin lines of blood behind her. "You broke my clay cup," Madame screamed, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "You worthless thing, you will pay for this." The other workers pressed themselves against the walls, heads bowed, eyes closed. They knew better than to interfere. Chief Bamidele's mansion was beautiful on the outside, white pillars, flowering gardens, golden gates that shone in the sunlight. But inside, fear lived in every corner. Madame Ifonse ruled with an iron fist, and her husband, the millionaire himself, never said a word to stop her. The girl sobbed quietly, begging for mercy, but mercy never lived in this house. Just as Madame raised her hand to strike again, the gold gate creaked open slowly. Everyone froze. A new maid stepped through, carrying a small cloth bundle. She was calm, her eyes steady. Madame Ifonse turned sharply, and for just a moment, something flickered across her face. Recognition, fear, hatred. The new maid's name was Sade, and everything was about to change. The servants gathered around Sade in the dim back room where they slept on thin mats. Their voices were low, urgent, filled with warnings. "This house eats people," an older woman named Mama Kike whispered, her hands trembling as she peeled cassava. "We have lost so many workers here. They come, they anger Madame, and then they disappear." Sade listened quietly, folding her wrapper neatly beside her mat. Another servant, a young man named Tunde, pointed to the wall near the kitchen door. Scratched into the wood were names, dozens of them, but many had been crossed out violently, like someone wanted to erase their existence completely. "See," Tunde said, fear thick in his voice. "Those are the ones who are no longer here. Madame does not forgive, she does not forget." Sade ran her fingers over the scratched names. Some were fresh, some were old and faded. "Where did they go?" she asked softly. No one answered. They only looked away. That evening, the head servant, a bent old man named Babagbenga, pulled Sade aside. His face was lined with years of suffering. "You have been assigned to Madame's private wing," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "That is where she keeps her secrets. No one who enters there stays long." Sade nodded slowly. And that night, alone in the dark, she whispered a single prayer. "Guide my hands, steady my heart." The next morning, Madame Ifonse summoned Sade to the grand sitting room. The floor was polished marble, cold beneath bare feet. Heavy curtains blocked the sunlight, making the room feel like a tomb. Madame sat on a velvet chair dressed in expensive lace, gold jewelry glittering on her wrists and neck. She looked like royalty, but her eyes were cruel. "So, you are the new one," Madame said slowly, studying Sade from head to toe. "Do you know who I am?" Sade bowed her head respectfully. "Yes, ma, you are Madame Ifonse, wife of Chief Bamidele." Madame's lips curled into a cold smile. "Then you know I do not tolerate nonsense. Kneel." The room went silent. The other servants standing nearby held their breath. Kneeling was not just respect here. It was submission. It was fear. It was surrender. Sade slowly lowered herself to her knees, but she did not tremble. She did not beg. She simply knelt with quiet dignity, her back straight, her eyes lowered in calm respect. Madame's smile faded. She hated calm. She fled on fear. And just as Madame leaned forward to speak again, something strange happened. Behind her, mounted on the wall, was a large gold-framed mirror. Without warning, a thin crack split down the center of the glass. The sound was soft but unmistakable. Everyone gasped. Madame spun around, staring at the mirror in shock, and Sade, still kneeling, whispered under her breath, "Truth always cracks lies." Hey, sorry for the interruption, but if you love emotionally gripping stories with betrayal, justice, and unforgettable twists, you are in the right place. These aren't just stories. They reflect real life and hit hard. If you enjoy wicked people being exposed and underdogs rising, subscribe. You won't just watch, you'll feel it. That afternoon, Sade saw the millionaire for the first time. Chief Bamidele was a tall man with broad shoulders and a face that might have once been kind, but now sadness hung over him like a heavy cloud. He walked through his own mansion like a ghost, silent, distant, present, but not really there. The servants whispered that he had not always been this way. Years ago, before Madame Efonse, he was known for his laughter, his generosity, his love for the people. But something had changed him. Something had stolen his voice. Sade watched him from the corner of the courtyard as he stood near the fountain, staring at the water. His hands were clasped behind his back, his shoulders tight with tension. He looked like a man trapped inside his own life. Madame appeared beside him suddenly, her hand resting on his arm possessively. She whispered something into his ear. He did not respond. He only nodded slowly, like a tree bending in the wind. Then she walked away, her wrapper swishing behind her, leaving him standing alone once more. That night, Sade lay on her mat, unable to sleep. The window near her bed was open, and the cool night breeze drifted in. She could hear the distant sound of the river flowing somewhere beyond the estate walls. And then, just as sleep began to pull her under, she heard it, a whisper, soft, clear, unmistakable. Return. Sade's eyes shot open. The river had spoken. Sade woke before dawn and began her work quietly. She swept the courtyard, washed the cooking pots, and prepared the morning meal without complaint. But she also did something the others did not expect. She saved half of her own food and gave it to the girl Madame had dragged across the stones the day before. The girl's name was Aduni. Her knees were still bandaged, her face swollen from crying. When Sade offered her the food, Aduni stared at her in disbelief. "Why are you helping me?" Aduni whispered. "You will get in trouble." Sade smiled gently. "Trouble will come whether I help or not, so I choose kindness." Word spread quickly among the servants. The new maid was different. She did not gossip, she did not compete, she shared what little she had. And slowly, something dangerous began to grow in that house. Hope. But hope was a threat to Madame Efonsani. 2 days later, Madame's personal charm bracelet went missing. It was a delicate thing made of red coral beads and gold, a bracelet she wore every single day for luck. When she realized it was gone, her scream shook the entire mansion. "Someone stole it!" she shouted, her voice wild with rage. "Search everyone! Search everything!" The servants trembled, knowing what came next. Madame's eyes landed on Sade, and a slow, wicked smile spread across her face. "The new girl," she said softly. "She is the one. I know it." And just like that, Sade became the accused. The courtyard became a trial ground. Madame ordered all the servants to gather in a circle. Sade stood in the center, calm, her hands folded in front of her. Madame paced around her like a predator circling prey. "Search her belongings," Madame commanded. 2 guards entered the servant quarters and returned moments later with Sade's small cloth bundle. They untied it slowly in front of everyone. Inside was nothing but a worn wrapper, a wooden comb, a small Bible, and a piece of white chalk wrapped carefully in cloth. No bracelet. Madame's jaw tightened. Search her mat, search under it, search everything. The guards obeyed. They tore apart Sade's sleeping area, shaking out her mat, checking beneath the stones. Still nothing. The other servants exchanged confused glances. Maybe Sade was innocent after all. But Madame was not finished. She nodded toward her most trusted guard, a man named Wale. He stepped forward, holding something in his hand. The red coral bracelet. "I found this," Wale announced loudly, "hidden in the new maid's bedding." Gasps filled the courtyard. Sade's eyes widened, but she did not panic. She looked directly at Madame and said quietly, "I did not take it." Madame smiled triumphantly. "Liar." But then Sade did something unexpected. She pointed to her cloth bundle, still lying open on the ground. "My bundle was tied exactly as I left it this morning," she said firmly. "If I had hidden the bracelet there, the knot would be different." Silence fell, because she was right. Before anyone could respond, a small voice broke the silence. "I saw something." Everyone turned. A young houseboy, no more than 10 years old, stepped forward. His name was Chidi, and he cleaned the floors near Madame's private rooms. His hands shook as he spoke. I saw Madame's right-hand woman, Sister Beatrice, go into the servants' quarters this morning. She was carrying something red. The courtyard erupted in whispers. Sister Beatrice's face went pale. Madame's expression darkened like a storm cloud. You lying child, Sister Beatrice shouted, rushing toward Chidi. But Chief Bamidele, who had been watching silently from the doorway, raised one hand. Let the boy speak. His voice was quiet, but it carried weight. Chidi's voice cracked with fear. I am telling the truth, sir. I saw her. She put something under the new maid's mat and left quickly. Madame laughed coldly. The boy is confused. He is a child. Children lie. But Chidi did not back down. I swear on my mother's grave, I am not lying. Then he collapsed to his knees, tears streaming down his face. Please do not hurt me for speaking. Madame's smile returned, but it was colder now, sharper. If you want to protect lies with truth, then the boy will clean the river at midnight, alone. Everyone froze. The river. At midnight. It was a death sentence. The river was forbidden after dark. People who went there alone never returned. Sade could not let the boy go alone. That night, she wrapped a dark cloth around her shoulders and followed Chidi quietly through the forest path toward the river. The moon was hidden behind thick clouds and the air felt heavy, unnatural. Chidi carried a small bucket, his steps slow and fearful. When they reached the riverbank, Sade stepped out from the shadows. You are not alone, she said gently. Chidi jumped, then burst into tears of relief. Sister Sade, you should not have come. Madame will punish you too. Let her try, Sade replied. They knelt by the water's edge. The river was eerily still, its surface smooth like black glass. But then, slowly, it began to move. Not like a current, but like something breathing. Chidi gasped. The water is alive. Sade felt a chill run down her spine. And then they heard it. A voice. Soft. Sad. Calling from the water. Chidi. Chidi. The boy's eyes went wide. That is my mother's voice, he whispered, trembling. But my mother is dead. The voice called again, closer now, more desperate. Chidi, come to me. Chidi stood, his body moving toward the water, like he was being pulled by invisible strings. Sade grabbed his arm tightly. Do not go, that is not your mother. But before she could pull him back, a figure appeared on the opposite bank. An old woman, bent and wrapped in white cloth, her eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. She pointed directly at Sade and spoke. This house is under a debt, and you have returned with the key. The old woman's name was Iya Morenike, and she was known throughout the villages as a seer, a keeper of old truths. The next morning, Sade went to find her. The shrine was hidden deep in the forest, surrounded by iroko trees whose roots twisted like ancient fingers. Iya Morenike sat outside her hut, grinding herbs in a stone bowl. She did not look up when Sade approached. I knew you would come, the elder said softly. Sade knelt respectfully. Grandmother, what did you mean last night? What debt? Iya Morenike finally looked at her, and her eyes were filled with sorrow. Madame Efonse's wealth is not clean. It is built on suffering. Long ago, she made a pact at this river. She offered pain in exchange for fortune. Every cruelty she commits feeds that pact. Every tear shed in that house strengthens her power. Sade's heart pounded. And the millionaire, Chief Bamidele? The elder sighed deeply. He is a good man who made one terrible mistake. He stayed silent. Silence can be as wicked as cruelty when it allows evil to thrive. Iya Morenike reached into a woven basket and pulled out a piece of white chalk, the same kind Sade carried in her bundle. This is river chalk, the elder explained. It comes from the sacred stones beneath the water. If you draw a circle with it, you create a boundary, protection, truth. But use it carefully, child. Once you draw the circle, You cannot step back, and you will lose something to gain something. Sade took the chalk with trembling hands. What will I lose? Iya Morinike smiled sadly. That only the river knows. Days passed, and Sade continued her work quietly. But one afternoon, while cleaning Madame's private wing, she found a door she had not noticed before. It was small, nearly hidden behind a heavy curtain, locked with a thick iron padlock. The air around it felt wrong, cold, stale, like something had been trapped inside for years. Sade glanced around. No one was watching. She pressed her ear against the wood. At first, there was only silence. Then, faintly, she heard it. A low hum. Not a human sound. Something older. Something wrong. Her hand trembled as she touched the door. It was warm, despite the cold air. And beneath her palm, she felt a faint vibration, like a heartbeat. That night, Sade could not sleep. She kept thinking about the locked room, the humming sound, the strange warmth. Finally, unable to resist, she crept through the dark hallways with a borrowed candle. The house was silent. She reached the door again and knelt before the lock. It was old, rusted. She pulled a thin wire from her hair and worked the lock carefully. It took several minutes, but finally, the lock clicked open. Sade pushed the door slowly. Inside, the room was small and windowless. The walls were lined with strange markings, symbols drawn in red clay. And in the center of the room sat a covered calabash, humming softly like a living thing. Sade stepped closer, her heart pounding. She reached out to touch it. The moment her fingers grazed the calabash, it shifted on its own. The lid moved slightly, and a whisper crawled out from inside. Thief! Madame Efonse's cruelty reached new heights during the feast. She invited wealthy guests from across the region, politicians, businessmen, women draped in gold and silk. The mansion glittered with candles and laughter. But for the servants, it was a night of humiliation. Madame ordered them to serve on their knees, not just bowing, but crawling across the marble floor with trays balanced on their heads. The guests watched, some amused, some uncomfortable, but none objected. Sade was assigned to pour palm wine for Madame's table. She knelt beside Madame's chair, holding the clay jug steady. Madame smiled at her guests and gestured towards Sade. "This is my new maid," she said mockingly. "Very obedient, very quiet, like a good servant should be." The guests chuckled politely. Madame continued, "Pour my wine, girl. Slowly. Let everyone see how well trained you are." Sade tilted the jug carefully, pouring the golden liquid into Madame's cup. But as the wine filled the cup, something strange happened. For just a heartbeat, the liquid turned black, dark as ink, dark as sin. Several guests gasped. Madame's smile froze. She stared into the cup, her hand trembling. But when she blinked, the wine was golden again, normal, as if nothing had happened. She looked around quickly. "Did you see?" But her guests only looked confused. "See what, Madame?" one asked politely. Madame forced a laugh, but her eyes burned with fury as she glared at Sade. And Sade, still kneeling, whispered so softly only Madame could hear, "The river sees everything." After the feast, Madame's jealousy burned hotter than ever. She had overheard two guests whispering near the garden. "That new maid has such a calm presence," one woman said. "She carries herself with quiet dignity." "Yes," the other agreed. "Even on her knees, she seemed stronger than most people standing." Those words haunted Madame. She could not bear anyone shining in her presence, even a servant. That night, she summoned Sister Beatrice, her most loyal follower. "Take the new maid to the forest tomorrow," Madame said coldly. "Tell her you need firewood. Take her deep, very deep." Sister Beatrice hesitated. "And then, Madame?" Madame's eyes glittered dangerously. "Make sure she understands this house has no room for pride." Sister Beatrice nodded slowly, and when she left the room, she carried a coil of rope hidden beneath her wrapper. The next morning, Sister Beatrice woke Sade early. "We need firewood for the kitchen," she said flatly. "Follow me." Sade sensed something wrong immediately. Sister Beatrice's voice was too cold, her movements too stiff. But Sade did not refuse. She simply wrapped her headscarf tightly and followed. They walked for over an hour, deeper and deeper into the forest. The trees grew thicker, the light dimmer. Birds stopped singing. The air felt heavy. Finally, Sister Beatrice stopped in a clearing. She turned to Sade, her face hard. Madame says you think you are better than us. Sade shook her head calmly. I do not think that. Liar. Sister Beatrice pulled out the rope, and Sade knew the time for running had come. Sade ran. She did not look back. She heard Sister Beatrice shouting behind her, crashing through the bushes, but Sade's legs were strong and fear gave her speed. She ran until her lungs burned, until the trees became a blur, until she could no longer hear footsteps behind her. Finally, she collapsed against a thick tree trunk, gasping for breath. Her hands trembled, her heart pounded, but she was alive. As her breathing slowed, she noticed something strange. The tree she leaned against was not ordinary. Its bark was covered in carvings, names, dozens of them scratched deep into the wood. Sade's blood ran cold. She recognized some of these names. They matched the ones crossed out on the wall back at the mansion. The missing workers, the ones who disappeared. They had been brought here, to this forest, and they never returned. Sade ran her fingers over the carvings, her throat tight with grief. And then she saw it. Near the bottom of the tree, partially hidden by moss, was a name that made her freeze. Aposede Olamide. Her mother's name. Her real mother. The one who died when Sade was a baby. The one no one spoke about. Sade's hands shook as she traced the letters. How? She whispered. How is your name here? A deep voice answered from the shadows. Because she was the first death. Sade spun around. A figure stepped out from between the trees. Tall, dark, with eyes that glowed faintly like embers. Its head was crowned with twisted horns. You are the daughter of the river death, the figure said, its voice like grinding stone. And you have returned to finish what was started. Sade's heart raced, but she forced herself to stand tall. She remembered Iyamurinike's words. She reached into her wrapper and pulled out the white river chalk. The horned figure watched, unmoving. Do you think that will save you? It asked. It will give me truth, Sade replied. She knelt quickly and drew a circle around herself on the forest floor. The chalk glowed faintly as the line closed. The horned figure stepped forward, then stopped. It could not cross. Its eyes burned with frustration. You cannot hide in that circle forever. I do not need forever, Sade said. I only need time. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Then, something happened inside her. A pressure in her chest, tight and heavy, began to lift. Fear. The fear she had carried her entire life. The fear that kept her silent. The fear that made her small. It drained out of her like water through cupped hands. When she opened her eyes, she felt different. Lighter. Stronger. Calmer. The horned figure tilted its head, confused. What did you lose? Sade smiled faintly. Fear. The figure stepped back, and for the first time, it looked uncertain. Your payment has begun, it said quietly. You have traded fear for courage. But courage comes with a cost. You will face what others run from. Then it melted back into the shadows. Sade stood alone in the circle, her hands steady, her heart clear. And she knew without a doubt that she was no longer the same girl who had entered this forest. When Sade returned to the mansion that evening, covered in dirt and scratches, the entire household was in chaos. Sister Beatrice had returned hours earlier, claiming Sade had run away. But now, here Sade stood, alive and unharmed. Madame Efonse's face twisted with fury. Where have you been? She demanded. You abandoned your duties. But before Sade could answer, a voice cut through the courtyard. Enough. Everyone turned. Chief Bamidele stood in the doorway, his face calm but his eyes burning with something that had been buried for too long. He walked slowly toward his wife. You sent her to the forest with rope, he said quietly. Do you think I do not know what that means? Madame's eyes widened. My husband, You will not touch that girl again. His voice was steady, but the weight of it silenced the entire compound. Madame stared at him stunned. He had never defied her before. Not once. Not in all their years together. You do not command me, Madame hissed. Chief Bamidele looked at her for a long moment,
and sadness filled his face. I have been silent too long, and my silence has made me as guilty as you. Then he turned and walked away, leaving Madame standing alone, trembling with rage. That night, Madame went to the secret room. She locked the door behind her and uncovered the humming calabash. She stared at it, her breath coming fast. I need more power. The girl is dangerous. She must be stopped. The calabash hummed louder and a voice crawled out from inside. Then feed me more pain, or give her destiny.
Inside the calabash were things no one should ever see. Tiny cloth bundles, each one tied with black thread. Beads of different colors, some dull, some still faintly glowing. And names, written on small pieces of paper, rolled tight and pressed into the bottom. Each bundle represented a person's luck, their joy, their future. Madame had been stealing them for years. Every time someone suffered in her household, the calabash fed on their pain and gave her wealth in return. It was not magic. It was a pact, a debt paid with other people's lives. Madame's hands trembled as she added another bundle, this one tied with red thread. Inside was a piece of cloth torn from Sade's wrapper. Take her destiny, Madame whispered. Make her weak, make her suffer. The calabash pulsed, glowing faintly in the dark, and Madame smiled. But what she did not know was that Sade's destiny was no longer ordinary. She had already traded her fear. She had already touched the river chalk, and destinies that have been marked by the river cannot be stolen easily. That night, Sade dreamed. She saw her mother, young and beautiful, standing at the river's edge. You carry my name, her mother said softly, but you do not carry my fate. Finish what I could not. Sade woke with tears on her face. She did not understand everything yet, but she knew one thing clearly. This fight was bigger than just her. It was a debt passed down through blood, and it was time to pay it back. The sickness came suddenly. Servants woke with chills, their bodies trembling even under thick blankets. Their skin burned hot, but their bones felt frozen. Mama Kike collapsed while fetching water. Tunde could barely stand. Even the strongest workers stumbled through their tasks, weak and drained. But the strangest part was Madame Efunse herself. Her skin began to itch, not normal itching, but a crawling sensation, like ants beneath silk. She scratched until her arms bled, but the feeling would not stop. She tried herbs, she tried ointments. Nothing worked. The servants whispered that it was spiritual imbalance. When you take too much from the river takes back. Madame, desperate and terrified, blamed Sade. This started when she came, Madame screamed, pacing the courtyard. She brought a curse into my house. Chief Bamidele shook his head. You brought the curse yourself. But Madame would not listen. She ordered the guard to lock Sade in the storehouse, a small, dark room with no windows. Keep her there until she confesses, Madame commanded. The guards obeyed reluctantly, their faces filled with doubt. They locked Sade inside, and the heavy door slammed shut. Sade sat in the darkness, calm and quiet. She was not afraid, but outside, something strange began to happen. The estate's gold gate, the one that always stood firm and proud, would not close. No matter how many men pushed, no matter how hard they pulled, the gate stayed wide open. And as the wind howled through the compound, the gate creaked. It made a sound, a single word: death. The entire household gathered in the courtyard, staring at the gate in fear. No one could explain it. The hinges were strong, the metal was solid, but the gate refused to close, as if the estate itself was rejecting the wickedness inside. Chief Bamidele stood silently, his face pale. He knew what it meant. The debt was no longer hidden. It was being exposed. Madame Efunse screamed at the guards. Force it shut. Use ropes. Use chains. But no matter what they tried, the gate stayed open. And every time the wind blew, the creaking sound returned. Death. 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 The servants began to back away, terrified. Some made the sign of the cross. Others whispered prayers.
Even the bravest men looked ready to run. Then, slowly, the wind grew stronger. It howled through the open gate like a living thing, carrying with it the smell of river water, the smell of old blood, the smell of hidden sins. Madame stumbled backward, her eyes wide with terror. Close it now! But the gate would not obey. And deep inside the storehouse, Sade sat quietly in the dark, listening to the wind. She knew the river was speaking. She knew the truth was coming. And she knew that no lock, no gate, no power on earth could stop what was about to happen. The debt had been called, and it was time to pay it.
The next morning, Iyamorenike arrived at the estate. She did not knock. She did not ask permission. She simply walked through the open gate as if she had been expected. The servants parted for her, their faces filled with awe and fear. Madame Efonse stood frozen in the courtyard, her body trembling. "You," Madame whispered, "you should not be here." Iyamorenike stopped in the center of the courtyard and planted her walking stick firmly into the ground. "I go where the river sends me," the elder said calmly, "and the river has sent me here." Chief Bamidele stepped forward, his voice heavy. "What does the river want?" Iyamorenike looked at him with pity. "Justice. The river will collect what is owed. Either she returns what she has stolen, or the calabash will consume her from the inside out." Madame's face twisted with fury. "I will not give up my wealth. I earned it." "You stole it," Iyamorenike corrected. "You fed on the suffering of others. You made a pact with darkness, and now the payment is due." Madame laughed bitterly, then let the river try to take it. Iyamorenike sighed deeply. So be it. She turned and walked away, her footsteps slow and steady. But as she reached the gate, she stopped and spoke without turning around. "Before dawn, the truth will burn, and fire will meet water." That night, Madame whispered to her most trusted guards, "Go to the shrine, burn it to the ground. If the elder is gone, the river's voice dies with her." The men left silently, carrying torches, and Madame smiled, believing she had won. The shrine was set ablaze just before midnight. Flames roared into the sky, consuming the hut, the sacred trees, everything. The men watched, satisfied, believing they had destroyed the source of their problems. But then, something impossible happened. Clouds gathered instantly, thick and dark, swirling overhead like angry spirits. The wind howled, and rain began to fall. Not gentle rain, heavy, pounding rain, like the sky itself was weeping. The flames sputtered. The fire refused to grow. No matter how much the men tried to feed it, the rain fell harder, drenching everything. Within minutes, the fire was completely extinguished. The men ran, terrified, back toward the estate. And in the rain, standing at the edge of the forest, Sade saw something that made her heart stop. She saw the truth. She remembered Iyamorenike's words. She remembered her mother's name carved into the tree. And she remembered something Chief Bamidele had once said in passing, something no one thought was important. "My fortune began the day I married Madame Efonse. Before that, I was just a trader by the river." Sade's breath caught. The river. Chief Bamidele's wealth had started at the river, and her mother had drowned at the river. It was not a coincidence. It was a connection, a sacrifice. Sade whispered into the rain, "My mother was the first payment," and the river answered with thunder. Sade found Chief Bamidele standing alone beneath the great Iroko tree in the estate garden. Rain still fell lightly, dripping from the leaves above. He looked older now, worn down by years of silence. "Sir," Sade said gently, "I need to ask you something." He turned slowly, his eyes tired. "Ask." "Do you remember a woman named Abosede Olamide?" Sade's voice trembled. "She drowned at the river many years ago." Chief Bamidele's face went pale. "How do you know that name?" "She was my mother." The words hung in the air like a bleed. Chief Bamidele staggered backward, gripping the tree for support. No, that cannot be." Sade stepped closer, her voice steady but filled with pain. Iya Moreneke told me everything. My mother worked for you before you became wealthy. And when Madame Efonse made her pact with the river, my mother was the first sacrifice. She drowned, and your fortune began. Tears filled Chief Bamidele's eyes. I did not know, he whispered. I swear to you, I did not know. I thought it was an accident. I thought... His voice broke. I thought I was just lucky. Sade's own tears fell. You were not lucky, sir. You were built on bones. Chief Bamidele fell to his knees, sobbing. I should have asked. I should have questioned. I should have stopped her. Sade knelt beside him. You can stop her now. He looked up, his face wet with rain and tears. How? Expose the truth, Sade said. Tell everyone what you know. Let the river have justice. Chief Bamidele nodded slowly. But from behind a curtain in the mansion window, Madame Efonse watched, her face twisted with rage. She had heard everything. The next evening, Madame Efonse approached Sade with false sweetness. My dear, she said softly, I have been too harsh. Let me make amends. Sade looked at her cautiously. How, madame? Wash my most precious wrapper for me, madame said, holding out a beautiful woven cloth, deep blue with gold threading. Wash it in the river tonight. At midnight. It is tradition for forgiveness. The servants gasped. Everyone knew what that meant. The river at midnight, alone. It was a death sentence. But Sade looked Wadam directly in the eyes and said calmly, I will go. Mama Kike grabbed her arm. No, child, you would die. But Sade smiled gently. I will not die. I have something the river wants. Truth. That night, Sade walked to the river alone, carrying the wrapper. The water was still, dark, reflecting the moon like a mirror. She knelt at the edge and dipped the cloth into the water. The moment the fabric touched the river, something pulled. The cloth moved, sliding deeper into the water as if invisible hands were dragging it down. Sade held on tightly, but the pull grew stronger. Let go, a voice whispered from the water, or come with it. Sade's heart pounded, but she did not let go. Instead, she spoke. I am Abosede's daughter, and I know what you want. You do not want me, you want her. The river stilled. The pulling stopped. Say her true name, the voice commanded. Sade took a deep breath and whispered the name Iya Moreneke had told her, Madame Efonse's real name, the name she had hidden, Folashade Adeyemi. The water surged. The river rose like a living wall. Water rushed toward the estate, not flooding wildly, but moving with purpose, with intention. It flowed through the open gate, across the courtyard, and straight toward the mansion. Servants ran, screaming. Chief Bamidele stood frozen, watching, and Madame Efonse, inside her secret room, felt the floor tremble beneath her feet. The calabash on the table began to shake violently. Cracks formed along its surface. Light seeped through, blinding and hot. No, Madame screamed, trying to cover it, but it was too late. The calabash exploded. Tiny cloth bundles scattered across the room. Beads rolled in every direction. And the stolen destinies, the stolen luck, the stolen joy, they all returned to their owners. Outside, servants who had been sick suddenly felt strength return. Mama Kike stood upright, her back no longer bent. Tunde's eyes cleared. Even workers who had been silent for years found their voices again. Chief Bamidele felt something lift from his chest. A weight he had carried for so long he had forgotten what freedom felt like. Madame Efonse stumbled out of the room, her gold jewelry turning dull and grey, crumbling like ash, her expensive wrappers frayed at the edges. Her skin, once smooth, now showed every year of cruelty etched into her face. She tried to run, but the estate gate, which had been open for days, suddenly slammed shut with a deafening crash, locked, trapping her inside. Madame screamed, pounding on the gate. Let me out. I built this house. This is mine. And the wind answered, cold and final. You built it on bones. The truth spread through the estate like wildfire. Servants gathered in the courtyard, no longer afraid. They spoke openly now,
sharing stories of cruelty, of stolen wages, of friends who had disappeared. Chief Bamidele stood before them, his head bowed in shame. "I was a coward," he said, his voice breaking. "I saw the suffering and said nothing. I am as guilty as she is." The servants were silent. Some nodded, some wept, but no one condemned him, because unlike Madame, he had finally spoken. Iya Morenike arrived at dawn, walking through the now open gate. She looked at Madame Efonse, who sat crumpled on the ground, powerless, broken. "The river has taken back what you stole," Iya Morenike said quietly. "You will live, but without the stolen wealth. You will work as those you oppressed once worked." Madame looked up, her face twisted with bitterness. "I did it for power. I did it to survive." "No," Iya Morenike corrected. "You did it for greed. Survival does not require cruelty." Chief Bamidele stepped forward. "I will use what remains of my wealth to repay the families of those who suffered. I will turn this estate into a place of refuge, not fear." The servants cheered softly. Hope, real hope, filled the air for the first time in years. Sade stood quietly at the edge of the courtyard. Chief Bamidele approached her, tears in his eyes. "You saved us," he said. "Please stay. Let me give you wealth, land, anything." But Sade shook her head gently. "I do not want wealth built on pain. I only wanted truth." And she turned toward the river where her journey had begun. Sade left the estate at sunrise, carrying only her small cloth bundle. She walked back to the river where Iya Morenike waited for her. "You have done well, child," the elder said, smiling. "You honored your mother's name. You broke the cycle." Sade looked at the water, calm now, peaceful. What will happen to Madame? She will live, but without power, without wealth. She will learn what it means to depend on others' kindness. That is her true punishment. Sade nodded. "And Chief Bamidele? He will rebuild, not with stolen fortune, but with honest work. He has learned that silence is not peace, it is only delayed justice." Sade smiled faintly. Over the following months, the estate transformed. Chief Bamidele opened it as a refuge for the vulnerable, the abused, the forgotten. Servants became partners, fear became respect, and the name of the house changed from a place of dread to a place of healing. Sade chose to live near the river in a small hut surrounded by trees. She planted saplings in memory of those whose names had been erased, and whenever travelers passed, she shared her story, not for fame, so others would remember. Iya Morenike visited often. "Kindness is not weakness," she told Sade one evening. "It is power with clean hands." Sade looked at her hands, once trembling, now steady. "I understand now." And as the sun set over the river, Sade whispered a prayer for her mother, for the lost ones, for the broken ones, because she had learned the greatest truth of all. Fear can make you obey, but only kindness can make you return.